League winners, welcome back to Fourth and Frames. I'm Rhett Manuel, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Chris Battistell and Drew Scott. Tonight, the NFL draft is wrapped, and we will be joined by the incomparable Jayson Snyder of Dynasty Nerds to discuss what happened in the draft, how guys were affected by their new situation, who's up, who's down, and then we'll give you an updated mock to let you know what could be expected in upcoming rookie drafts. So let's get to it. Fourth and Frames country, let's ride. Now, before we jump into it, please like our stream, subscribe to the channel, and hammer the notification bell to get notified whenever the Fantasy and Frames Network drops new content. And most importantly, please rate and review the podcast. And if you haven't already, please follow our show on Twitter at Fourth and Frames. And while we're at it tonight, as usual, let's give some love to our producer of all of our Fantasy and Frames show, our boy Gator Jay. What's good, my brother? So, Drew, my man, I was a little bit busy this weekend. I was able to watch the first round. How much of the draft were you able to get to over the weekend?
I got all around one, most of day two, and then day three, I mostly just followed from my phone. I was on Sean Tucker Watch at that point, so I had to keep up on the phone at the very least. But I threw it on my laptop or my computer for a little bit whenever I was getting some gaming in, and watched some tweet picks, things like that. But most of that was just watching the picks on the ESPN app on day three.
Sean Tucker Watch, man, legends never die. And Chris, what about you?
I got all 3 days in. I sent my wife and kids over to my in-laws' place. I got some of my favorite snacks and sodas, and I did my best Leonardo DiCaprio. Whenever one of my players got drafted, I was pointing at the TV, just celebrating the landing spot.
Oh, man, that's fun. That's fun. And so we got ourselves a guest tonight, man. This guy, whenever I got into the fantasy space, it's one of the best dudes, one of the most welcoming people that I got into right away. His work at DynastyNerds.com is unbelievable. He focuses in on IDP stuff a lot of times, but he is a jack of all trades with all things fantasy football. My man can be found at Spides78 on Twitter. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jayson Snyder. Man, it's great to have you on. Man, how you doing?
It's great to be here, guys. Really looking forward to it.
Man, first things first, I need to tell you, we can't seem to escape you Eagles fans. We had Joe Pepe on a couple of weeks ago. But, I mean, you guys are all good. You've treated us well so far. Let's keep going, huh?
I scouted out your night with Joe, and I wanted to make sure you were treating Eagles fans right before I came on. So I'm glad you treated him well, because that made me feel like I could roll with you guys too.
Man, we treat everybody with love around here, though. So let's get into it, guys. So the NFL draft wrapped last week. We had months of speculation of where guys were going to land. That's finally all settled for us as analysts, but the work is truly just getting started. So that work for us is going to start tonight and kind of breaking things down a little bit. We have 7 rounds of picks in the books, and at this point, guys are getting into OTAs and mini camps, and only the strongest going to survive at this point. So with that being said, let's get straight into it, and let's start talking about some guys that were selected in round 1 of the draft. So NFL draft had 10 offensive guys that are of fantasy relevance selected in the opening round. You had Bryce Young with that top pick, then C.J. Stroud at the 1-2 to Houston. Anthony Richardson went 4th overall to Indianapolis. Then you had the running back run with Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs at 8th and 12th overall. Jackson Smith and Jigba, Quentin Johnston and Zay Flowers, that wide receiver run with Jordan Addison. Those were 120 through 123. And then Dalton Kincaid rounded out that first round with fantasy relevant players with that 25th pick to Buffalo. So, Jason, with that being said, let's get straight into it and let's ask you a question, man. Dalton Kincaid, that Buffalo landing spot, how plush is it for him? First, let's talk about that. And then from there, with this first round draft capital, where should dynasty players and maybe even redraft players be starting to target this guy now that we kind of have some clarity on the situation?
I think it's kind of interesting. Kincaid is a guy that I'm very conflicted on him right now. Obviously, you have to love the first round draft capital that you mentioned, and the incorporation into one of the NFL's most potent offenses in Buffalo is obviously going to catch people's eyes. But I have some reservations still about his usage. He struggles as an inline blocker, and I think there's a very defined role still there for Dawson Knox. And when I looked into it a little bit, he actually ranked 6th overall in the NFL according to PFF as a run blocker last year. Now, if you look at what some of the moves that the Bills have made this offseason, they added Damian Harris, and then just this week they added Latavius Murray. So that tells me they want to get into more of a power rushing situation, probably take some heat off of Josh Allen and keep him healthy because he's been banged up. And so if they're going to run more in a power rushing style, they're going to have Dawson Knox on the field in order to do that. I mean, that's not Kincaid's game at all. So I guess I expect Kincaid to be deployed, at least initially in his career, as kind of a big slot in their offense. I would expect to see a lot of 12 personnel where both he and Knox get on the field at the same time. Former fantasy darling Isaiah McKenzie was their slot guy last year, and he saw 67 targets as their primary slot receiver. And then if you look at Dawson Knox targets, he had 65. So even if we're really generous, I would think that Kincaid's target, ceiling this year is probably about 70 targets. Now, if you kind of juxtapose those numbers over some of the other tight ends in football last year, you're talking about guys like Hayden Hurst, who had 70, Cole Kmet, who had 69, and Tunyon, who had 67. Now, those are guys that are all serviceable, but they're not elite. So all this leads me to the point that I think people may need to be a little bit patient with a guy like Kincaid. He's going to need some time to develop into an every down player. I'm probably more comfortable selecting him like in the beginning and middle of like the second round of rookie drafts. But I think at that point, I'm probably not going to end up with him very often because somebody's going to get attracted by the shiny new toy and go for him, at the end of late in, say, the first round. And I just feel like that's too rich for me right now from my perspective.
And look, I hear where you're on that because in a lot of ways over the years, one practice that I've started to undertake, and these guys have heard me say it before, is that rookie tight ends have so much to learn because you have the inline stuff. You have the route stuff that you need to run, the route trees and all those different things. And yes, so even if he is employed as a move tight end or a big slot, you're still talking about advancing from what is a pretty simplistic Utah situation where they didn't run an overly complex offense to an NFL offense. So I'm kind of with you on that in that situation. Chris, you have any thoughts on that, man?
Sorry, I was muted there. Not too much on Dalton Kincaid. I agree with a lot with what Jason said there. But he has been going in that 1.6 to 1.8 range in rookie mocks or rookie drafts that I've been in. I'm not comfortable taking him that early. I'd rather take one of the positional players there, someone with a little bit more upside. I don't hate the player, but where his value is right now, like you stated, Jay, with the shiny new toy thing there, I'm not comfortable reaching. I'm good taking a guy like Sam Laporta or maybe even a Brenton Strange later in my rookie drafts than reaching up to take Dalton Kincaid.
And look, you mentioned a guy like Sam Laporta. Actually, earlier today in our Fantasy and Frames rookie draft, I landed Sam Laporta in the first pick of the third round. So, if you're willing to wait on value, understanding that tight ends are going to take some time, there's value to be had in this rookie class because there are quite a few of them. So let's keep it moving, guys. Drew, we draft night, we kind of got into and we were a little bit shocked. Not necessarily shocked, but that 4th overall pick in the draft, Anthony Richardson, and everybody kind of goes, ooh, landing spot, Jonathan Taylor, zone read, RBO, Shane Steichen, like all these different things. So I have to ask you the question personally, based off of his landing spot in Indianapolis. Let's ask the hard question. Is Anthony Richardson worthy, not necessarily should he be, but is he worthy of that 101 in Superflex formats? And let's ask you personally, would you pull the trigger on it?
Worthy of is tricky because, in Superflex, I think you can make the argument that he's worthy of it. As far as me making the pick, I'm not doing it personally. I'm still taking Bijan at the 101 regardless of format. In my eyes, he's the best running back prospect we've seen since Saquon. And then on top of that, he got top 10 draft capital in the NFL draft on a team that wants to run the ball like crazy. Arthur Smith is dying to be the most run-heavy team in the league. So you mix that with the draft capital and the prospect he already was, I'm taking him at 101 regardless. But I do like the landing spot and everything that you mentioned, and I do think he should be the quarterback one of this class and the 102 in Superflex draft. So not extremely far off from the 101, but me personally, I'm not pulling the trigger there.
Right. Now I'm with you on there. I've been in several rookie drafts this week, and that's all been Anthony Richardson hasn't been in that 101 spot. So people are holding the line on Bijan. Chris, I know you've got some takes on Anthony Richardson. I know we have to buckle up Buttercup for this one. So let me know exactly. Go off. Pop off on your Anthony Richardson frame, my man.
Yeah, I'm going to push back against the consensus a little bit here. He has been going pretty much as the steady 102 in Superflex rookie drafts, but color me a little bit of a pessimistic here. Pre-draft, I stated that for Richardson to grow in the NFL, he needs to be drafted in a situation where he won't be asked to do too much year one. Now there's reports coming out Indianapolis is getting ready for this guy to be that starter week one of this upcoming season. He's an elite athlete, 100%, no doubt. And he's got the great system, great head coach. They're the head coach that helped Jalen Hurts get to where he is today. But if you're breaking down the two players, I've seen some of the projection trajectories that Anthony Richardson could reach that Jalen Hurts level, but Jalen Hurts has played a ton of football. He's competed against and for some of the best schools in the nation. He has competed for and won national championships. If you break down their college attempts, Hurts is sitting at 984, Richardson at 393, almost 3 times the amount. Richardson has never had a season where he's completed 60% or more of his passes. Hurts has averaged about 71% completion over his last 2 seasons at the college level. Richardson has never had a season where he's rushed over 1,000 yards in the college game. To me, Richardson is nothing more than a less talented passer than Trey Lance. Trey Lance has put up 1,000-yard rushing in college. He's a better passer than Anthony Richardson is. With the 102 upside aside, I'm not buying it there. I'm not saying to completely fade Anthony Richardson. I'd rather take the safer quarterback, the guy that I've seen with my own 2 eyes throw the ball. And Anthony Richardson drafted as a quarterback. It's going to take time for him. My preferred landing spot was Seattle in that system behind Geno Smith for a year. But the Colts took him. They're talking about starting him. And there's an old saying in Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me, you can't get fooled again. For Lamar Jackson's MVP season, he threw for over 3,000 yards, 39 touchdowns, and rushed for over 1,000 yards. I don't see Anthony Richardson getting nowhere near that production, maybe rushing, but not passing. Best case scenario you're hoping for, Daniel Jones. QB is one of the toughest positions to build in Dynasty. If I'm picking at the 102, I want a guy that I know can be a starting quarterback in the NFL. Most leagues are getting themselves to that spot of 6-point passing TDs. And for that, I'm going to take the guy that I know can play quarterback at the next level. Again, it's not a complete fade on Anthony Richardson. I'm good with him going in the top 5 picks of your rookie drafts, but picking him before a guy like CJ Stroud, who was my personal QB1 coming in, and even maybe Bryce Young. I know the size issue is something to be concerned of with Bryce Young. I'm just not doing it. It's a buyer beware situation for me.
So, yeah, I'm with you on a lot of that, but it also sounds to me, without you really saying it, that Minshew mania is alive and well in your heart, and we're still here for some Gardner Minshew action no matter what.
Yeah,
so,
gotta love Gardner Minshew, man.
We gotta love him. So, look, for all of our Twitter viewers, just a quick reminder for you guys that please hop on over to the YouTube channel if you're looking to interact and ask us some questions. We can't get those questions through Twitter, but we can absolutely get them through YouTube. So if y'all go ahead and hop on over there, we're happy to accommodate those questions for you. So, Chris, let's keep it with you. all along this draft process and we were speculating, you were probably more than me and Drew, the biggest Jordan Addison guy that we had amongst us. Well, night one happens, round one happens. Your boy ends up with the best landing spot among the rookie wide receivers, arguably, playing alongside Justin Jefferson. Sorry, that's the LSU coming out of me. Justin Jefferson in Minnesota. So now we know he's in this great landing spot. We know he has a quarterback who will feed the hot hand whenever he's there. So now that we know where Jordan Addison is, how have your first year expectations adjusted for him?
I'm tempted to put him as a wide receiver 1 for the rookie class for redraft. Jackson Smith-Njigba is the wide receiver 1 to me in the class, but Jordan Addison has all the opportunity in Minnesota to have a rookie of the year season. The volume that he's going to have in Minnesota is going to be great. He's entering a situation where Adam Thielen is leaving with 107 vacated targets, a team that was top 5 in passing in 2022. 64% of their snaps were passing attempts. Every Hall needs an Oates. Every Batman needs a Robin. Every Burt needs an Ernie. Every Pinky needs a Brain, and Addison is going to be that for Justin Jefferson. He's proven that he can play in all areas of the field. He was utilized at the line of scrimmage and out wide at USC. His time at Pitt, he was a hyper-targeted slot receiver, which led him to win the Biletnikoff Award, which is the top wide receiver in the nation in the college game, where he was competing for that award against the wide receivers that he was drafted against in this class. I have him finishing as a mid wide receiver 2 with the wide receiver 2 high-end possibility there. He's in a great spot in Minnesota. Based on early projections on strength of schedule from the averages opposition defenses put up versus the wide receiver last season, the schedule as of right now for the Vikings is very favorable. I'm buying Addison, and he's my Vontae Mack at all cost player in these rookie drafts. My year 1 projection, 70 catches, 900 yards, 6.5 tutties.
That's a saucy projection for year 1, especially playing alongside Jefferson and with TJ Hawkinson. But, have faith in your guys, like we say. Yep. So real quick, moving into round 2, several guys of fantasy relevance, including Fourth and Frame's favorite quarterback, Will Levis, going in the second pick of round 2, 33 overall. Couple tight ends with Sam Laporta and Michael Mayer. Jonathan Mingo, a little bit surprising, going in the top 40 selections. Another tight end in Luke Musgrave. Jaden Reed, Zach Charbonnet, Rashee Rice, Luke Schoonmaker, Brenton Strange, and Marvin Mims kind of rounded out that second round. So a lot of guys who can possibly have some fantasy value. But let's go ahead and let's throw it back to Jason. A guy that some people perceive as being a big loser during this draft process in terms of fantasy was Zach Charbonnet. A lot of people were high on him. Then he lands in what ends up being a situation where we have an established running back who had a great year 1 in Kenneth Walker. So let's just ask the question. Let's give our listeners and our watchers what they need to know. Zach Charbonnet sharing a backfield with Kenneth Walker. How positively or negatively does this affect him?
Well, I mean, I trust that you guys are kind of still in mourning, just like I am about Charbonnet in this landing spot. I mean, that's pretty ugly. I mean, he's a guy that I was high heading in, but Seattle's about the worst place I think he could have surfaced in that draft. And I think Pete Carroll has a reputation for being a coach that does not care about your fantasy team. I mean, it's evident by the carousel of recent running backs. Think about guys like Chris Carson, Rashad Penny, J.D. McKissick did a cup of coffee up there, and they always eat into the lead backs, productivity and numbers. Let's not forget, even last year, he was playing guys like DJ Dallas well into the midpoint of the year over Kenneth Walker until they were all hurt and he was forced to play Kenneth Walker. So all of those things, have me concerned. I mean, now Charbonnet comes to town with many of the same skill sets or skills that Walker has. And so it's not an issue where, one guy's a satellite back and the other guy's a bruiser. I mean, they're both two Walker's 211, Charbonnet's 214. I mean, they run hard. They have solid frames. I think they're going to be used interchangeably. I think I think Carroll's betting on the fact that he can't ever have a healthy back. So he's just going to have a stable of them and he's going to roll through them. And whoever is the hot man or the healthy man, that's who's going to get the playing time. But that's going to look ugly on your stat sheet for sure. And what the real tragedy of it is for me is Walker was a big riser, was high on a lot of people's boards coming into that draft. Mm-hmm. And not only does this affect Charbonnet, but it affects adversely Walker, in my opinion. So I think we'll see Charbonnet probably fall to like the late first, early second round range at worst. And because of that landing spot, like you mentioned, but I mean, some people are going to bet on the talent. And I mean, it's hard to argue that approach. If you always go with the talent, you're probably going to end up pretty well in Dynasty. But I think I'd be opting for some of the receiving options, specifically Addison that we just talked about, or Quentin Johnson or Zay Flowers. I would take all of those guys over Charbonnet right now because I just don't like the look of what's to come in Seattle at the running back position right now.
And, I think you make a really, really great point about the skill sets being so similar. There could be 1 week where you could have Zach Charbonnet having a 70% snap share, and the next week, Ken Walker having that 70% snap share. And for some reason, there are reports coming out that Pete Carroll seems to like Zach Charbonnet in the screen game, which is something that we haven't really even seen Charbonnet do that much at the college level. So it's a confusing situation, no doubt about it. But let's pivot over to Drew. Let's talk a little wide receiver. Little bit of a surprising top 40 pick was Jonathan Mingo out of Ole Miss going to Carolina. It's a guy who we see the physical traits. We know what the tape looks like, but the point is when you also watch the tape, you watch a guy who has never had a huge college season. This isn't A.J. Brown. This isn't one of those other Ole Miss receivers that came and just had these huge college numbers and had that pedigree to back him up. So tell me, in your opinion, what are the Panthers banking on making this guy a potential future wide receiver one in their offense?
Yeah, so I think part of it is what you just said, that, due to the fact that this is a draft full of short kings, he offers what a lot of receivers in this class can't, which is his size. He's 6'1", 220, and he's a freak athletically. According to Player Profiler, he had the second highest athleticism score in this wide receiver class, which takes into consideration a player's 40-time burst score, agility score, and normalizes it all for size. So, at the size that I mentioned, the dude ran a 4.4640 and was above the 90th percentile in both speed score and burst score. So I think that plays a big part in it. And then I think you just listen to what the organization's telling us after they took him on day 2 at the press conference. Their head coach, Frank Wright, had mentioned, the first things that he mentioned his size and his speed. And then he said he liked his elite ball skills, and then he thought he was a good scheme fit for him, and that they liked that they can move him around the field, and that they believe his ball skills mixed with having a super accurate passer and Bryce Young should be a great fit. So hearing them say that, it makes sense on how we can envision them possibly using Mingo. If you really want to do like doing the glass all the way full argument for Mingo, we talked about his lack of production. His junior year, he did have 15 catches for 290 yards and 3 touchdowns in 3 games before breaking his foot. So we can't guarantee that the breakout was going to happen, but it seemed like that junior year breakout was coming before he got injured. And then his sophomore year, as everybody else was, he was dealing with the pandemic. And then Elijah Moore was soaking up a lot of targets there at Ole Miss as well. So you can kind of try to paint a picture of why the production is lacking until his senior year. But nevertheless, it's still a lot of projecting. And I'm not saying you have to vault him up your receiver rankings, but I do think you have to listen to the draft capital and what the coaching staff is telling us at least a little bit. So for me, honestly, after the top 4 receivers, after the 4 first-round guys, there's not a guy that I feel strongly about that just needs to be the wide receiver 5, but that is where I have Mingo post-draft for everything that I've mentioned. But he's in the same tier with Marvin Mims, Rashee Rice, and Chris's boy, Jaden Reed. So I think he should be in the mix at least once we get done talking about the round 1 receivers in this class.
So let's just bounce back real quick and go quickly for me. Is that lack of an early breakout and that late declare a concern for you analytically for Mingo?
I mean, it is. That's a box that you would like ideally all of your wide receiver prospects to check. And the reality is, if you check that box, if the junior year breakout would have happened, if he wouldn't have got injured, he probably would have been in last year's class and we wouldn't have been talking about this. So it's typically, if somebody doesn't have that early breakout, I would like for, or if they're not an early declare, I guess, I would like for it to be because they're in a crowded receiver room more so than because they're of injuries or anything like that. Like Chris Olave, he was, he didn't go out to a senior year, but if you look at the receiver room he dealt with, you can kind of understand why. So it's not the same situation, but if you want to try to paint that picture for Mingo, there are counter arguments there.
Right. And so from there, let's just go ahead and you mentioned him. Chris mentioned him a couple weeks ago as a potential sleeper. Well, the nap is over for Jayden Reed. He ends up getting that second round draft capital with the Green Bay Packers. So he's got the high draft capital now. He's in a situation where it was arguably the worst receiver room in the NFL before he got there. What changes for Jayden Reed now?
Mainly his ADP. Just this past Monday night, Jay and I were doing the Mocking After Dark. One show he was going in mid-second. Another draft he's going mid-third, fourth round there. In our Fantasy and Frames Dynasty draft, he went mid to early second there. But I think that was just to snipe me from Tyler. But pre-draft, he was a day 3 wide receiver, projected to be 4th or 5th round. He was a dominant wide receiver, slot wide receiver at Michigan State. He's entering a great position with the Green Bay Packers. Lazard's out. We saw today their starting wide receiver, Randall Cobb, is out. The opportunity is there. Him and Wicks are in. The fit, I just love the fit. The Packers are a team that highly targets the slot wide receiver. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to bail out Jordan Love. If you watch his tape, he works back towards the ball. He's got decent hands. I dig what he can do, and he's set up to succeed in that Packers offense. He'll be a solid flex wide receiver 3 for fantasy managers moving forward. Jason, I got to ask, since I'm a big Jayden Reed guy, is Jayden Reed a player you are targeting in your rookie drafts?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with all the points that you just made. I mean, I think Green Bay has kind of got that blank slate thing going on right now too, where, I mean, Aaron Rodgers left and in his wake, he took like the entire passing offense with him. So, I mean, you gotta pay attention to especially a guy like Reed that has a skill set that he has. But I mean, any body that can catch a pass up there is somebody that could break out this season, just because there's a whole new cast coming. It's not your father's Green Bay Packers this season, in Wisconsin. So it's going to be a whole new look offense for them, and he could definitely be a part of it.
Yeah, and he's shown that he can play both inside and outside. His best year in 2021, he had a high amount of snaps playing on the outside as that outside wide receiver. So I'm excited for Jayden Reed. Hopefully the ADP kind of cools on him. I don't see it cooling on him, and I feel like I'm going to have to reach a little bit in order to acquire him.
And yeah, from our YouTube comments, Jamie Pirog is out here saying that Jayden Reed will out-target Romeo Doubs in day 1. And I can't argue with that, because last season we had the training camp moment of Romeo Doubs that didn't really come to fruition. So, I'm with that take. I'm with that. So let's move into day 2 real quick, guys. Several guys go in that 3rd round. That QB5 and pretty much everybody's board. Hendon Hooker goes to the Detroit Lions. One of my personal favorite guys, because I watched him live and covered him, Tank Dell. Goes to the Texans. Drew's favorite, Kendre Miller. We'll talk about him. Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, another tight end in Tucker Kraft, Josh Downs, my guy Tajay Spears, A-Chain, Tank Bigsby, Darnell Washington, Michael Wilson, Trey Tucker, and Cameron Letu. A lot of guys in round 3, but let's start off our day 2 discussion with a running back debate. First, I want to go to Jason. Then Chris, you follow him up. Tajay Spears ends up with probably one of the better landing spots based off of Derrick Henry's age in day 2 and going to Tennessee. We've heard that speculation of a Derrick Henry trade during the draft season. Probably a smoke screen, but let's roll with it anyway. Do you guys see Tennessee actually banking on Tajay Spears as their running back of the future, or is this kind of just a change of pace situation?
So I'll take the ball first here, and I'll tell you that, I mean, just my appraisal of the situation. I mean, with a rush-heavy offense that's become kind of the identity for the Titans, you absolutely need to be tuned into any running back that they add in their system. Got bottom feeder guys like Dontrell Hilliard have had fantasy relevance in recent years. I mean, if Dontrell Hilliard can give you something, then anybody can give you something out of that program, in my opinion. I'm not trying to throw shade at Dontrell Hilliard, but I mean, I think Tajay Spears has a lot over him for certain. Now, there's certainly a lot to like there. He brings quickness. He has agility. He's got very good vision. He's a bit undersized, though. He's 5'10", and he's on 201. And he's got an injury history, with his knees, kind of reminiscent of Jay Ajayi within the last 10 years, you may recall. He kind of came into the league and already had pre-existing issues with his knees and had kind of an expiration date on his career before he took a snap. I kind of feel like Spears may be that type of guy. He may have a burst of a career, but he may not even make it to a second contract. He may be that type of a player. I think, my opinion is that's where he pairs nicely with the guy they picked last year out of Michigan, which is Hassan Haskins. He's a bruiser. He's 6'2", he's 228, and he's going to be the pounder. He's going to be the thunder to the lightning, and they're probably banking on that tandem to carry them into the future. You're asked about the future, Chris. Excuse me. I think that's where they're headed is, those two kind of leading the backfield. They prioritize a pipeline of skilled backs so that because they have a proclivity to run the ball so heavily. Now, that being said, I'm not necessarily convinced that Henry's on the way out. I think if he was on the way out, that would have happened at or before the draft. And since it hasn't happened, I don't know that they're going to find a partner to make that trade now because everybody's kind of pretty entrenched in their plans for 2023 at this point. So I do think he's going to be the lead back, Henry, that is, in 2023. So when you go with a guy like Spears, you've got to have some patience and you got to have some vision for the future and say, okay, in 2024, 2025, he and Haskins might be that tandem that looks strong. But it's not, I don't think it's going to be an instantaneous thing. And that's where I think if you're savvy in Dynasty, you let somebody else draft Spears, and about week 8, when he hasn't played any snaps, you send that, you float that person an offer and go, hey, I'll give you a 4th for him if you want to dump him, if he's clogging up your roster. And all of a sudden now you got that guy in your pocket and you're sitting pretty for going into next season. That's how I would approach it anyway.
Yeah, I would approach it the same way. The way we look at running backs fantasy wise, it's a 2 to 3 year window. He's the shooting star running back to me. He's going to burn bright early, and then he's with that knee issue with the ACL, or in his case, lack thereof. He's gonna burn out. I don't see him being that bell cow guy, but he is going to get some usage. He's a versatile running back, as you can see with his splits in the zone and gap usage at Tulane. He's the RB2 in the class in yards after contact. So he's a guy that he's gonna break the arm tackles. He's gonna cause defenders to miss. When you're watching him running downfield, you're going to see him try to use the angles that the DBs are using to tackle him against them, create space, get open, and break off a run. He finished the season at Tulane with 800-yard or more games. So he is a running back that can be capable for you, but my worry is just that knee issue. And like Jason said, with Henry still being there, I love and where Tajay Spears is going in that late second. I love letting someone else grab him and then go in and trade him for a midseason.
Yeah, it's a good take. It's a way I hadn't even thought of it as of yet. But, I was kind of getting into these rookie drafts and debating him, but might be pivoting off of that now. So let's just ask you the question, Drew, quickly. Choose your warrior, Devin Achane or Tajay Spears, and quickly tell me why.
So I've got them in the same tier right now, but I've got Achane at RB5 and Spears at RB7. So give me Achane slightly. I know you talked about Tennessee being an ideal landing spot in the second round. I raised you what I think was probably the most ideal landing spot for a running back in the draft class this year in Miami, at least for the guys that were projected to go second round and beyond. So I know his size usually isn't a great bet, but it's easy to see a world in where his speed thrives in this offense. And they were only picked 3 spots apart in the 3rd round, so you don't have to worry about any draft capital arguments. But whenever you look at the landing spot, assuming Henry doesn't get traded, which I agree with Jason, I don't think will happen. I like the offense that A-Chain's in more, and I like his path to touches more. So if I'm being honest, the whole knee thing with Spears does scare me too. Jason mentioned kind of the possible short shelf life, and that reminded me of a tweet that I saw. I had to go find while he was talking. David Chow, Pro Football Doc, a former NFL team doctor for years, was talking about this. And he essentially said that his arthritic knees with bone spurs are rarely unstable, and he expects him to be able to play in the NFL, but will have a very short career. And that's one guy, whenever you're looking at players' medicals, like, guys on the outside now like us, he's, in my opinion, he's one of the best to follow for that aspect. So whenever I saw that kind of raised a red flag for me as well. So I like Spears more as a prospect pre-draft, but now that the landing spots are entrenched and we have more information on the injuries that have come out, I did move him down a little bit post-draft.
Yeah, love it, man. Love it. So let's go ahead and let's move into a couple really notable guys on day 3 that about a year ago were being seen as potential first-round guys in Kayshon Boutte and Zach Evans. Kayshon Boutte ends up going to the 6th round, 10th pick overall to the New England Patriots, and Zach Evans ends up being the 38th pick of the 6th round with the Los Angeles Rams. So, Jason, what happened with those 2 guys that caused them to fall so far so fast, and what can we expect now that they are where they are and they're not the shining sterling things they were a year ago?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with Evans. I'm a little bit more bullish on his long-term potential. He transferred from TCU to Ole Miss in 2022, and he didn't have the type of springboard season that I'm sure he would have liked. In fact, you could make the case that staying at TCU may have better served him, although there he would have had to contend with Kendre Miller. So, I mean, we just talked about shared backfields earlier. That may have washed both of them out. So I could understand the move, but he certainly didn't thrive at Ole Miss in his 2022 season. Certainly the 6th round draft capital is less than ideal, but for me, Evans lands in a very choice spot with the Rams. I mean, Cam Akers' 2022 return from an Achilles tear was a bit of a letdown, to say it mildly. And based on usage and the public comments, I think it's fair to wonder whether the organization has kind of lost faith in Akers. Elsewhere on that depth chart, you've got guys like Kieran Williams and Ronnie Rivers. I mean, those guys don't necessarily scare me. I mean, if Evans has the talent that we think he does, maybe the NFL doesn't think he does, but at least fantasy players think he does, he should be at least able to contend with those guys out of camp. And as far as the Rams go, I mean, if they can exercise some of their demons from last year and kind of return closer to form of their Super Bowl season, I mean, there's a lot of offensive potential there. Sean McVay didn't forget how to coach in one season, and he was the darling of the NFL for years. So, I mean, if LA gets back to their winning ways and it's not at all difficult for me to imagine a scenario where Evans kind of entrenches himself and establishes a significant role there. Now, switching to Boutte, I actually did a rookie profile on him for Dynasty Nerds back in February. And when I sat down to watch the film, I found I was very underwhelmed. And it was funny because he had a lot of hype at that time, but we hadn't really gotten into the draft season. And I was like, can I trust my eyes here? Because he's a name that everybody talks about, and I'm not seeing it on this film. Based on reputation alone, I thought I'd see more plus attributes, and they just weren't there on the film. Many have dismissed his lackluster play in 2022 to recovery from like his lingering ankle injuries. But what I found most drawing was kind of a lack of mental engagement and effort. He would jog through routes. He would look unprepared to receive the ball. He was often lazy in his blocking. He would lay a guy and just let his running back get crushed. So I was not surprised to see him fall in the draft. Those are not attributes that scouts are going to be wowed by. So that being said, then let's consider his landing spot. He goes to New England, right? New England has had some horrific years in terms of selecting and developing wide receivers. Just for prep, I went through, here's a list of all the wideouts that the Patriots have drafted in the last 10 drafts.
Oh, man.
Buckle up for this one.
Yeah.
Jeremy Gallen, Devin Lucien, Malcolm Mitchell, Braxton Berrios, N'Keal Harry, Trey Nixon, Tyquan Thornton. That's not
winners.
That's not a murderer's row of receivers. So,
No.
I mean, that list inspire any confidence in you that they're going to develop Butte into a real player? I mean, a late round receiver with effort and consistency issues paired with Bill Belichick. That doesn't sound like a good combo to me. Sounds like a disaster, frankly. And I mean, that's a situation that I want no part of unless it's like ridiculously late and I can get him for practically free in my rookie draft. I'm not touching that guy.
Yeah, man, it's true. You know, that's another one of those things where even last week, whenever we were mocking him, we was like, oh, mid-second, I'll take a flyer on him. Landing spots matter, though, and especially with Bill Belichick, who hasn't had the greatest track record of evaluating receivers. It's hard to get on board right now with Kayshawn. I agree with you on there. So, guys, let's go ahead and jump ship. Let's actually talk about getting some mock picks in here. So our rules are simple. Same last time we did this with rookies, 12 teams, Superflex format, half PPR. Took care of our draft order. Jayson, you'll be at the 1-1. Drew will be second pick. I'll be the third. Chris will be the fourth. And we'll keep rotating until the round is over. So with that being said, Jayson Snyder, you were on the clock. Do not shock us here. Who are you going with at the 1-1?
Well, I don't think this is going to shock anybody, but I'm going to go conventional here. And I'm going to go with Bijan. I mean, he's a generational type running back, and that's what drives the bus in Dynasty. So I'm gonna go ahead and secure Bijan at 101.
Yeah, no shocks there. Drew, 1-2. What are you looking at, man?
I'm sticking with consensus here as well. I talked about him as my QB1 earlier, so nothing changes now. Give me Anthony Richardson here.
Yeah, me at the 1-3. I'm gonna go ahead, especially with the DeAndre Swift trade. Jahmyr Gibbs landing in Detroit, 12th overall. First round draft capital for running backs really matters. And you're looking at a guy who can immediately step into that Swift role. I'm looking at him as a lock for 50 to 60 catches next year for sure. So at the 1-3, even in a super flex format, you have a guy who can come in and catch 60 balls year one at the running back position. That's a slam dunk pick for me that returns immediate value. So Jahmyr Gibbs rocking at the 1-3. Chris Battistell, 4th overall. It gets a little bit more difficult at this point. What you got?
I've actually been liking this 1-4 to 1-6 spot in these rookie drafts. I'm going to go, I'm going to stick with my guns here. My QB1 pre-draft, my QB1 post-draft, and that's CJ Stroud of the Houston Texans. They're going to build something around him where he's going to be long-term finish as the QB1 in this class, especially if your league is a 6-point TD league. CJ Stroud has the tools that I want. He can make all the throws. So give me CJ Stroud there.
Perfect. Jayson, back to you at the 105. What are you looking at, man?
Well, I'm looking at a beautiful board because I'm sitting at 105 and I just landed Bryce Young in a super flex. So I'm pretty excited about that. And I'm more than happy to collect on Bryce Young at 105.
In the format, you can't argue with the logic at all.
Nope.
Moving into that 106, Drew, take it away.
Yeah, I think this is for me right now, this is a pretty clear tier break right here where I'm going to take JSN at this spot, and then having the 3 quarterbacks, the 2 top 15 running backs, and then my wide receiver 1. I think this is kind of, I would like to try to get into the top 6. If I can't get into the top 6, then pretty much anywhere in the first round, is fine with me at that point. So you're muted, Rhett.
It's sort of an interesting thing in that in these super flex formats, somebody who landed in as good of a landing spot as JSN kind of ends up in that mid-first round. But I mean, that's kind of where the format goes. So looking at the 107, you have to once again think landing spots, and you have to think, we talked about him earlier, next to Jordan Jefferson, it has to be Jordan Addison in that 107. I mean, you're talking about a guy who is going to land with a quarterback with a lot of experience, a lot of weapons. Like I mentioned, a quarterback who loves riding that hot hand. We saw KJ Osborne have some pretty big weeks last week. So just imagine a guy like Jordan Addison, getting fed next to Justin Jefferson, who is going to command all that attention. It's a slam dunk spot, 7th pick of the first round. In any draft, you can land Jordan Addison, fire away, because it is going to be wheels up, in my opinion. Chris in the 1-8, man, what are you looking at?
Rhett, I was so high on Jordan Addison. I was hoping you'd be a gracious host and let me have him, but unfortunately not. I'm gonna go Quentin Johnston, the wide receiver with the size, Los Angeles Chargers. He's the heir apparent to the Mike Williams position in that offense. Kellen Moore is there now, calling the shots for the Chargers. I like Quentin Johnston over Dalton Kincaid. Dalton Kincaid's been going in this spot. I'm gonna let the tight end slide, and I'm gonna pick a wide receiver who has the potential to be a wide receiver one.
And look, that's an interesting spot. We're not talking a lot about QJ right now, but if you look at the injury histories of a guy like Mike Williams and the fact that Keenan Allen is getting a little bit longer in the tooth, I mean, this is potentially a really, really solid spot to get a lot of production out of Quentin Johnston in year one. So at that 1-9, Jayson Snyder, run it back for us, man.
So we talked earlier about a tier break, and for me, this is the last pick of yet another tier break. I'm going to grab Zay Flowers here. I think he's the last of the big top receivers. I know he's taken a little bit of heat in terms of people having confidence in Baltimore's passing offense, but I think with Mark Andrews there clearing out the middle and him running slot routes and clean slot routes at that, I really like his potential in that offense. And to me, he stands above the other options here. So I'm going to grab Zay Flowers at 109.
Yeah, there are a lot of concerns about that Baltimore situation because of the fact that in the past they haven't really used wide receivers. But if you look at their activity this offseason, the change of offensive coordinators as well, there are some indications, there's some signs that times might be changing up in Baltimore. So, Drew, in that 10th pick of the first round, go ahead and run it for us, man.
Yeah, so I completely agree with Jason that this is a tier break for me as well. I was hoping that one of the guys that was in that previous tier would somehow fall to me, but these guys in front of me didn't let it happen. So with the first-round receivers off the board, right here's where I'm going to grab my RB3, and that is going to be New Orleans Saints running back Kendre Miller. And so, I mean, pre-draft, he was in the tier of like 7-8 running backs that, it wouldn't have shocked me which one got day 2 draft capital. But he was one of my favorites in that group. And he ended up getting that day 2 draft capital, got the landing spot where he's, couple running backs in their late 20s, Jamal Williams. It's a 3-year deal that's basically looks like a 2-year deal. And then Alvin Kamara, the potential suspension. I love Kendre Miller's size, speed. I think he has the build and the skill set to be a 3-down guy if a team chose to use him that way. And so the draft capital pushed him up to my RB3 at the clear beginning of this next tier.
Right, love that. And as a New Orleans Saints man, I mean, I love the Kendre pick myself from a football perspective. From a fantasy perspective, he's going to share that ball with Jamal Williams. Similar skill sets. We'll see how the receiving develops for him because he might have a little bit more of that role at the beginning of the season for the Saints if there's a Kamara suspension. Now, 111, if you'd have fielded this question for me a week ago, it would have been Tyjae Spears, but times have changed, landing spots have changed. You guys just talked me out of it a little bit. And also a week ago, if you would have told me that I would have had Devin Achane at the 111, I would have called you crazy. But here I am picking Devin Achane at the 111 because I love the landing spot. I love the fact that Mike McDaniel always seems to get the best out of these smaller, quick running backs. We've seen it with Raheem Mostert. We've seen it with Jeff Wilson. We've seen it over and over again. So for this situation, Mike McDaniel being a younger guy, I think he's going to play the Barney Stinson role from How I Met Your Mother and say new is always better. And so you've got the new toy. He's fast. He's going to do all the things. So be able to get that one cut and go like he likes. Achane at 111 is an interesting spot. I'm not sold on it, but I do like it enough to go ahead and take a flyer on it in that 11th pick of the first round. So with that being said, Chris, close us out.
I'm going to continue to push the tight end down the draft board. We talked about Jordan Addison and his situation entering to be that wide receiver 2 for the Minnesota Vikings. There's another wide receiver that has the potential to be the wide receiver 2 for his team. If that team can produce the passing volume that we need him to get to reach that point, The pick for me here is Josh Downs out of Indianapolis. I loved what he did in the University of North Carolina. He's creeping up draft boards for me. I've seen him go mid 2. I'm comfortable taking the upside of the player that is Josh Downs here and pushing that tight end back, pushing the running back like Zach Charbonnet back, that guy that's going to be in that committee role, that committee approach. So give me the guy that's going to have good opportunity and a ton of upside in that offense.
Yeah, I mean, can't argue with it. There is also the fact that we don't know what that offense is really going to look like. So the positions and the targets may be up for grabs in year 1 in Indianapolis. So top of that second round, Jayson Snyder, go ahead and help us out, bud.
Well, I'm gonna make some. Now we're gonna make some waves here.
I like it.
I'm gonna go with a guy that gets beat up pretty much in the fantasy industry, but I'm gonna take Will Levis here at 201. And the reason I'm gonna take Will Levis is, we talked earlier about Richardson and how the desirable location for Richardson would be to go to a team where he could learn and spend some time in the wings and be developed and groomed. Will Levis has that, guys. Yep. I mean, he's going to go to Tennessee. He's going to sit for the season. He's going to learn how to be a pro. He's going to get his maturity issues, if he has any, under control. He's going to learn that offense. And we talked about Spears and Hoskins going to take over that offense in 2024. Right alongside him is going to be Will Levis in my prediction. So if you get a guy like that in a super flex format that's, a starter for the future, and you can get him in the second round, it's easy money for me. I'm taking him, Will Levis at 201.
Look, I've gotten to the point where I was hating Will Levis for all this time. All of a sudden, for some reason, I'm in. If you can get Will Levis in this spot, let's roll, baby. Let's have fun.
Yeah.
Welcome to the party. We have cookies, man. Yeah. Drew, go ahead and hit us at the 2-2. Let's go, man.
Look, I'll say this about Will Levis, man. I still have him as my 12th overall player in Superflex. So, I love where he grabbed him at. And I am a Kentucky football fan, admittedly, have been my whole life. But he's still my QB4 in the class. But I think the Will Levis hate has gone a little bit too far. It's like one of those things where it's just like, if you want to be a cool guy on the internet right now, you need to be hating hard on Will Levis. But I don't know, man. His first year as a starter at Kentucky, whenever the offensive line was better, whenever he had Liam Cohen calling plays, things were a lot better. And then his last year, Liam Cohen went back to the Rams. The offensive line was in shambles. He was dealing with an injury all year. It's just, I think the next level Will Levis is probably somewhere in between what we saw junior year and senior year. I don't think what we saw his senior year is what he's going to be at the NFL level. I think that was kind of at his worst in college. So I'm glad to see the scales tipping back a little bit on the Levis hate. And Jason, I appreciate you leading the charge on that tonight. So,
hey, Drew, if you want to hear, I can't take one more take of somebody that tells me they hate him because he puts mayonnaise in his coffee. I can't take it anymore.
Banana thing.
Listen, and he even said he don't even really do that.
If you don't like the guy, that's fine. And if you have something to substantiate that, I'm all ears. But when you start telling me, oh, this guy puts mayo with his coffee, he can't play. I'm like,
he eats banana
come on, man. That is
I can only imagine the stuff Tom Brady does.
That is the most lazy, ridiculous analysis I've ever heard in my life. Yep. So yeah,
it's about as tired as trying to compare Anthony Richardson to Malik Willis. Like those are two discussions that I'm beyond over. Jason, you're not wrong, man. They're absolutely excuses. I want Levis to succeed so bad, but I do think the hate's gone a little bit too far.
I agree with you. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, man.
No, I love the discussion, man. More of that. So, all right, 202. I'm going to take the first round tight end that went to Buffalo. I'm going to grab Dalton Kincaid here. I get the concerns. I mean, typically we have to wait 2-3 years for tight ends to really show any kind of life in fantasy. But I think Buffalo clearly knew that they needed more weapons. Gabe Davis kind of has been underwhelming after he was supposed to set the world on fire last year. And I don't think they have a consistent second pass catching option behind Stephon Diggs. And whenever Stephon Diggs was, having an off game or our defense took him out of the picture, Buffalo really struggled to move the ball. And so I don't think it's insane or out of the realm of possibilities for Dalton Kincaid to be their second best pass catching option as soon as next year, definitely in his second year. And at this point, in the second round with a tight end with his profile, getting first round draft capital to an elite offense, I'm more than happy to grab him here at the top of the second.
Right. I mean, learning curve or not, at this point, you're looking at a value there. Speaking of values, in the third pick of the second round, a guy who was largely considered a first-round talent and is still considered a late first-round talent, Zach Charbonnet falls to me at the third pick of the second round. If you get that in your fantasy leagues, in your dynasty leagues in a rookie draft, jump on that. I don't care about the situation at this point. We've seen the talent, and I'm always about getting value on players over landing spots, because if anybody can become a value when they get into the right draft capital, and third pick of the second round, that's a Zach Charbonnet sweet spot where you just have to take him no matter what, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So, Chris, fourth pick, second round.
I'm going Roschon Johnson, Chicago Bears. I found that the second round of these rookie drafts have been the round of the running back. I love what he's going to be able to do for the Bears. He's drafted by the new coaching staff there. He's going to fit. He's going to fit what they. I know Khalil Herbert's your guy, brother.
I'm laughing at Jamie. We've already went back and forth about Roschon already in the mocking after dark, and then he's attacking me again.
I love the situation there.
It
fits what they want to do. He's a premier pass blocking running back. Something that the Bears need to keep Justin Fields on his feet is that guy to protect Justin Fields. I think he's going to carve out a role, especially inside the 5. You could definitely see a situation where he's utilized like a Jamal Williams was in Detroit last season, where he's primarily that touchdown vulture. So I'm good with taking Roschon here, especially. Doesn't have a lot of tread. He's got a lot of tread on his tires still, working in Texas behind Bijan. So give me Roschon there.
Great pick, and especially talking about some people have him late first round, get him toward the middle of the second round. Good stuff there. Jayson Snyder, 2.5. What are we going with, man?
Well, I think at this point in the draft, you start to get into pick your poison territory. I mean, you got to go with your guys here. I mean, ADP is kind of meaningless to me. You got to find the guys that mean something to you, and you got to stick to your convictions. So for me, that guy is Michael Mayer. I liked him almost as much or even more than Dalton Kincaid coming into the draft. I realized Kincaid got him on the draft capital, but Mayer still went just outside the first round to Las Vegas, who without Waller is going to have a void there at tight end. I like his size because I feel like he's not going to fall. You know, I talked about Kincaid earlier and my worries about whether he's going to be a full-time player and how many snaps he's going to get. Mayer, I expect to be on the field all the time. I mean, guy's big, guy can block, guy can get physical on routes, guy can, get open in the end zone. And so for that reason, I like his potential. I mean, I know that offense is somewhat not very sexy right now, but I mean, they still do have Adams. They still do have Josh Jacobs. I mean, they got some pieces, and I think Mayer's a nice fit there. So for where we are in the draft right now, I'm happy to grab Michael Mayer.
Right, 100%. Drew, midway through round 2, go ahead and set it off.
Yeah, so I want to say this real quick about Roschon. I have nothing against Roschon the player. Like I think he's a good running back. I do. And I like Khalil Herbert and I like Deontay Foreman too. And that's part of my problem is I think trying to decide how that backfield is going to shake out, like good luck, man. But I think the Chicago's doing it right from a roster building standpoint. They didn't put a lot of money into the running back position, but no matter who's touching the ball, they're going to have a plus talent at running back touching the ball without having a huge financial investment. So I like what they're doing. It scares me grabbing a day 3 running back at this point in a rookie draft. I would prefer to wait a little bit later. So that's my only case. I'm going to take. I've already talked about him. Give me Jonathan Mingo here at this pick. I think again I get the lack of production, but listen to the draft capital. Listen to what the team's telling us about how much they're excited for him, and it's kind of similar. They're not from a player arc standpoint, but it reminds me a little bit of Jahan Dotson last year, where he went earlier in the NFL draft and people thought he would, and the dynasty community didn't necessarily react to that as much as we probably should have. He went later in rookie drafts, and then he ended up flourishing. And again, Mingo wasn't a first-round pick, so it's not an exact comparison, but I think there are some similarities there where because of the shock value of how high he went, we might not react the way we should.
Right. So let's go ahead and let's move quickly into this 2-7. I'm looking at Tank Bigsby in the middle of the second round, and I'm taking that guy. I like the position. I like the fact that Travis Etienne is not necessarily the most unfragile running back. And at this point, middle of the second round, especially if you have Etienne on your roster, handcuffs are a valuable asset. So this point in the draft, you see a guy like Tank Bigsby, you see the upside, you see the size, you see the speed combo. It feels like a pretty good slam dunk for me. Chris, 2-8, did I just take your pick?
You did. You sniped me. I was planning to stack the running backs there, but I'm going to go Marvin Mims out of Denver. He is the wide receiver brought in from that coaching staff, the new coaching staff, Sean Payton's coaching staff there. I like the situation. There is a little bit of a clog in front of him in order to get playing time, but I think he's a better wide receiver than guys like Tim Patrick and KJ Hamler there. There was talks pre-draft that they were planning on moving either a Cortland Sutton or a Jerry Jeudy. I don't see one of those happening right now, but as a dynasty asset here in the second round, I'm taking the elite athlete that is Marvin Mims.
Good deal. Jayson Snyder, 2-9, man. Last pick of the draft.
I'll keep us rolling here. And, my explanation on this one is just, first of all, I like the player, but I also like quite a bit the landing spot. And I'm going to go with Jalen Hyatt, the wide receiver out of Tennessee. I mean, when I look at the Giants, first of all, they were reportedly in on any big name free agent wide receiver during free agency. They didn't land one. They reportedly were trying to trade for one. They clearly need somebody that can help them with receptions in that offense. They had a bunch of, mid-tier guys that kind of just cycled through their offense last year. And I think maybe Hyatt can get in there and quickly establish a role for himself. And, I wouldn't necessarily feel the same way if he was going to Buffalo or some other place where he had to contend with a lot of options. But I think the pantry's pretty bare in New York. And for that reason, I really like the fit for Jalen Hyatt here. And to be late in the second round, I think that's a great value.
Yep.
I agree with that. Drew, your last pick of the draft, second round, 10th pick. Go ahead.
So my last pick in the draft, I'm going to take somebody that I guess I'm the tight end guy tonight, but I'm going to take a guy that I battled with possibly being my tight end one, but he ended up settling in as my tight end two. And it's Sam Laporta with the Detroit Lions. I love the landing spot. I love his game, how it translates to fantasy, how often he was in the slot, how often he ran routes in college. It all seems to translate well to what we want for pass catching tight ends in fantasy. And then possibly my favorite thing about the fit with him and where he went is, we know the whole biting your kneecaps off things with Detroit and all the jokes and the memes and stuff. And Laporta's not the biggest guy, but he's a willing blocker though, even though he doesn't have the size. And I just envision Dan Campbell watching his tape and watching this smaller tight end still trying to block his ass off and also being a great pass catcher. And it just makes the fit make even more sense for me.
Yeah, I just got Laporta as well in like the beginning of the third round. So you're right in that sweet spot, I would think. Pick 11 of the second round. It's a super flex format. Let's shake it up. Let's have some fun. He's not a year one pick at all, but he's possibly a future starter. You got to risk it for the biscuit, baby. Let's go with Hendon Hooker. We'll see if he can adjust to the NFL. I know the offense was a little bit simplistic, but we know he's got the athleticism. We know he's got a good arm. We know he can make every throw in the playbook. So in that case, in the Superflex format, late second round, you have a quarterback, you take that quarterback, you take the chance. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. But if you're right, you're booming and you're setting it off right here. All right, rounding it out to 12. Chris Battistell, go ahead.
I'm going to go my guy here, keep on brand, and I'm going to go Jaden Reed, wide receiver out of Green Bay. I've talked about him enough ad nauseum. I don't need to explain anymore why I like Jaden Reed and his fit there. But I think it's a good spot to take him. Usually he's going in this spot, early third. So I'm going to take Jaden Reed there.
Right. So, yeah. Jason, anything that really shocked you in this 2-round mock that we just did?
You know what's funny? What just shocked me was your Hendon Hooker pick, and I only say that because I was thinking about taking him when I took Jalen Hyatt. To be honest with you,
Nice.
Just because of the reasons that you explained. I mean, it's a super flex format, and if you don't have a quarterback in super flex, and you don't have a stable of quarterbacks, you're in trouble. I mean, those guys get banged up, they get hurt, and then you're in the middle of the season and you're at a disadvantage. So I have no issue. I mean, I earlier in the draft took Levis and was more than content to wait a year for him. So I have no issue with you taking Hooker and doing the same there.
Mm-hmm.
Right, man, and I appreciate that. Thank you for giving me my adulations there. You're a real one for that. Jayson, we love having you on tonight, man. We appreciate your time. We're going to give you the floor a little bit. Go ahead and plug anything you might have going on inside or outside of the fantasy football world right now.
I mean, you can follow me on Twitter. You see my Twitter handle, Spide78. We talked about it earlier. I have primarily written content with Dynasty Nerds. You'll see some stuff over the summer. We do a lot of team previews, and we're into that phase of the season now where we're start looking at training camp and how are things shaking out, and give you an advantage for your fantasy season coming up. When we get in season, I do a weekly column on start sits for quarterbacks, so you can look for that content as well. But basically, I'm around, and if anybody out there wants to talk to me or pick my brain on get my opinions on things, I'm more than happy to provide it. You can ask my wife; she'd much rather me talk to you than tell her about my fantasy opinions because she's had enough of
it. I've never been able to relate to somebody so much, and right now in this moment.
And my wife also agrees with you on that. So I mean, guys, look, we did it. That's another show in the books. This is Fourth and Frames. And once again, if you're looking for us on Twitter, you can find me at RManuel Sports, Chris at FFChrisB, and Drew at Drew3MR, and Jayson, of course, at Spides78. And as usual, on behalf of my brothers, Drew and Chris, I am Rhett Manuel, and from the bottom of our hearts, we thank you so much for spending a little bit of your Wednesday night with us. Make sure to continue checking out our YouTube channel and subscribe to our Fantasy and Frames channel over there. We're doing a lot of awesome things with some shorts right now. There's some reaction with the NFL draft. I promise you don't want to miss any of it because there's some really good stuff coming out right now. And as always, join us again next week as we continue to give you championship level advice and have a little bit of fun while doing so. So with that said, listeners, be blessed. Y'all have a great night. We out.